Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we are trying to climb to 2200 rapid elo, and we've had a couple of setbacks recently, I'm not gonna lie, as well as setbacks with the video upload schedule in general, because I'm moving place and it's all very hectic. But anyway, the chess, c5, the Sicilian Defense, and of course we're going to play a3, the Mengarini Sicilian, which is a line I learned from an old Gotham chess course a long time ago and have since adapted over the years of playing it with great success, really. And knight c6 leads to one of the very, very fun variations after pawn b4, going for a gambit line immediately. And we're simply gambiting the a and b pawns for the c pawn. And on top of that, we're getting the knight to come to b4, which allows us to play c3 with tempo, and then go d4. And then the d4 pawn is supported very nicely. And we're kind of threatening to play d5. And after something like let's say, I don't know, black plays something silly, like queen c7? I don't know, maybe we can then go like d5, knight e5, f4, knight g6, and get a very big initiative going. But d5 is the main line, and this is actually what we want to see. Now, typically in the Sicilian Defense, if you can play d5 as the black pieces, you should play d5, because normally it's just good practice. And in theory, black has two pieces developed, we have no pieces developed, and black is up a pawn. But we have this very nice knight to a3 move. And the big question for black is, how do you stop knight b5, knight c7? And it's not an easy question to answer, because firstly, a6 doesn't work, which my opponent plays. If knight b5, you can't take the knight because the rook hangs, right? What a6 also does is gives us the option of playing knight c4 and knight to b6, which is actually the more accurate way to go about this, which I never really understood until recently how good going after this b6 square is, because the dark squares are so vulnerable. And as I mentioned earlier, this d5 move is a big threat. It hasn't gone away. It's still there. And if we can kick this knight, it won't have the e5 square anymore. It may have to retreat back to b8. And then we may have moves like bishop to b5 in the future, for example, where you won't be able to take because the rook hangs. My opponent goes queen to e4 check, which means that knight to b6 will no longer come with a fork. And this is an interesting moment because we have a lot of ways to block this check. We have bishop e3, we have knight e3, we have queen e2, we have bishop e2, and we have knight e2. So we have, what, 5 ways to block the check. We're obviously not going to move the king. And I don't like knight e2. Well, obviously queen e2 I don't want to play, because why would I want to trade the queens? That's silly. Knight e2 I don't like, because we're not actually getting rid of the queen from the e4 square. And also, we don't get to develop this bishop because the knight is in the way. Bishop e3 looks quite interesting. Maybe preparing something like bishop d3, although, you know, gambiting the g2 pawn is interesting. We could also choose to go bishop e2 and prepare to get castled very quickly and play a move like rook e1, which could be very nice given the e file could be vulnerable. And if e6 is played to develop the dark squared bishop, d5 could be very effective with the rook on the e1 square. So I think I'm leaning more towards bishop e2. And if queen to g2, then after bishop f3 guarding the rook and hitting the queen, let's say queen back to g6. So bishop e2, queen g2, bishop f3, queen g6. And I don't know, something like pawn d5, knight b8, knight b6, and we'd probably... No, we couldn't play that because the queen defends that square for the time being. But that would fork the bishop and the rook, theoretically. So maybe we just go bishop e3 to prepare that, for example. So I'm pretty sure bishop e2 is the way to go. And even if it isn't, like even if queen g2 is a good move, which I don't think it is, this is still very difficult for black. Like, he can nab this pawn, which he does, and he can go up 2 pawns, which he is now up. But after bishop f3, the queen will retreat. And the amount of pressure we have on the queen side could become very, very difficult to deal with. So, okay, let's think. My initial idea was to go pawn d5, followed by knight b6. But of course, the queen would guard the b6 square. So we could potentially change the move order and go for knight b6 first, because the knight is blocking the queen's scope of the b6 square. So if knight b6, rook b8, guarding the bishop and making sure we can't capture the rook, maybe then pawn d5, but also maybe knight d5, and saying, okay, well, how are you going to stop knight c7? And if, like, queen d6, we have bishop f4, guarded by the knight, and controlling c7, which, well, skewering the queen and the rook, actually. Also, now I'm thinking about it, with the exact same idea, knight b6, rook b8, bishop f4, how does black defend himself? I mean, if e5, trying to block my bishop, take? Maybe? I mean, it looks pretty good. Pawn e6 would threaten the rook. We're down 2 pawns, but we have all the initiative. Alternatively, we could go for the immediate bishop f4, preparing knight b6, right? Because then e5 is very hard to play, and rook b8 will just hang a rook. So if bishop f4, e5, we can just take with the knight, maybe. Or maybe even take on c6, and after queen takes, knight takes, maybe just queen c3. So maybe not. But it is interesting. We should consider d5, though. d5, knight b8. And bishop e3. Maybe does knight d7, guarding the b6 square. Maybe that's a good counter. So, okay, I'm between knight b6 and bishop f4. Those are the 2 moves I'm considering. We could play a move like knight e2, trying to go knight f4 with tempo, and then knight d5, going after b6 and c7, which looks interesting. If pawn e5, we can probably just take that. That looks fine to me. And then knight to f4 is still on the way. Rook to g1 could be played. But it feels slow. It feels unnecessarily slow. I feel like we should have enough to just go for it now. Knight b6, rook b8, bishop f4, pawn e5. DE5, bishop c5. Maybe I just go knight d5, eyeing up c7. Yeah, because with the d file open, that's a big problem, I think. I don't know. Knight b6 or bishop f4. Maybe bishop f4 is better. Stopping rook b8. Can black do anything about that? I don't think so. I'm going to go bishop f4. I like it. I feel like it's so hard for black to develop that we can afford to take an extra move to increase the pressure on the black position. And namely, we want to control e5 to stop pawn e5, c7 for a potential knight c7, and most importantly, b8 to stop rook b8. So that knight b6 would be game over. Okay, my opponent gives a check on e6. And of course, if we move the king, we'll lose the knight. If we block with the knight, we'll lose the knight. So we could block with the bishop, which would defend the knight, but that's slightly passive. We could also defend with the queen. And if queen takes, knight b6 is still a major threat, which looks very, very hard for black to actually prevent. But okay, maybe bishop e2 is good, because d5 is also a threat, though. And maybe knight to f3 is a good move at some point. I've got to admit, though, I'm also leaning towards queen e2. And I think I'm going to play it, because I don't actually see how black is going to survive I mean, he's up 2 pawns, but we have 4 pieces developed. D5 is a big threat. I would argue this rook is developed as well. It's on its starting square, but it's looking at an entire A file, which is heavily restricting the movement of the black pieces. The issue, of course, though, is that we're down 2 pawns. But knight b6 will win the game on the spot if we get to play it. And I don't see how black can prevent that move. If pawn e5, I mean, we have loads of options. We could just take it. And after, like, knight takes, bishop takes, we're only up 1 pawn, but we have a lot of pressure. If pawn e5, we can also consider bishop takes c6 with check, b takes, knight takes with tempo, bishop d7. Maybe the initiative runs out a bit. So maybe e5 is the way to go, to try and give back a little bit of material, to try to consolidate the position. Even then, though, like, how effective is it going to be? Like, take, knight b6. If you take my bishop, I'll take your rook. If rook b8, my bishop doesn't control that square anymore. If I take and take and take, a6 is threatened. If rook back to a8. Maybe black survives that? I'm not sure. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, I do think e5 is effectively forced because black needs to develop, and he needs to do it quickly. And a move like e6 isn't going to cut it, because knight b6 will end the game. The rook will be attacked, the bishop will be attacked, and you can't move the rook while defending the bishop because of my bishop. So the idea with e5 is to eliminate that problem, because he's attacking my bishop, forcing me to take this pawn and making it so that I can't play knight b6 very easily. Although, actually, if e5, maybe I can just go knight b6 without taking on c6. And if you take my bishop, I take the rook, and I'm up in exchange, and f4 will probably fall, and d5 is still a major threat. Knight c7 is nice. So if e5, knight b6, rook b8, because of course my bishop is blocked. Let's say we take here with the pawn, threatening pawn e6 with tempo. Maybe bishop e6 to block that. And then knight d4 looks pretty nice. And if knight takes, pawn takes, then d5 could be problematic. I just think that it's going to be so hard for black to develop his king side in time to meet all my threats, and pawns like a6 and b7 will be very likely to fall in a lot of the lines. And along, if, you know, the a, b, and d pawns all fall, I'll be up a pawn. Now that's maybe a bit of a pipe dream, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. So, okay. Knight b6. Was I miscalculating this? Was I miscalculating this? No, sorry, it was e5, knight b6, rook b8. Yeah, this was it. And then how does black continue was the question. How does black continue? I mean, I'd love to, like, take and then take, but after b takes, my knight will hang. So it's not going to be quite that easy. Taking on c6 will come with issues. Alternatively, black could consider just developing his bishop. Like, okay, bishop e6 probably isn't great. Maybe bishop f5, for example. which he does actually go for. So nice prediction. But I thought a move like d5 would be crushing, just forcing the knight back. Doesn't that just end the game? d5, knight b8, knight b6, rook a7, bishop b8, game over. d6 will come with devastating threats. Knight d4 will come with tempo. Yeah, I think e5 was necessary. Kind of like fried liver sort of fashion, where d5 is played to sacrifice a pawn, but gain activity in return for it. But here, of course, black is already up 2 pawns, so giving one away should be fine for him. But yeah, I mean, here, there's no good way for black to counterattack. I mean, if e5, then just take, rook b8, rook a6, rook a8 is happening, game over. So e5 isn't good enough anymore. It's too late. And, I mean, where else can the knight go? If the knight goes to d8, then after knight b6, the rook has to go to a7. And then, I mean, it's not game over yet, but the rook can't move, the knight can't move. Ooh, wow, that's a very aggressive move. Take, c7, game over. I don't think I'm missing anything here. I mean, I could go knight b6 first, which might even be more accurate, because there's no rook b8. Yeah, the black position is just getting swarmed. My bishops are active, my knight is incredibly active, my d-pawn is a major threat, and as I said way earlier in the game on like move, what was it, move like 5, that d5 could be a big problem for black to deal with, and it is. Let's take the pawn, c7 is threatened, and that's game over. I mean, yeah, completely winning position. We're up a piece for 2 pawns, but those 2 pawns are not impressing anybody. I think bishop c6 would be the most accurate move here, because if you block with a knight, I take this rook for free, and if you block with a bishop, knight takes, bishop b7, I guess. Or actually, queenside castle would be a very cool move, which is the move I'll probably go for. The knight is pinned to the king can't move, and as we see, neither of the kingside, bishop, or rook manage to play any part in the game at all. It's completely out of the game. So yeah, bishop d7 is unstoppable. You can sack the rook, but I mean, you'll be down so much material that it's not worth noting, I suppose. But yeah, this is the power of the Mengarini Sicilian, and I mean, my opponent is 2200. He's a good player. He's a good player, but yeah, the Mengarini takes a lot of people by surprise, because it's not an opening that many people play. It's not like a meta opening or anything like that. It's a very weird sideline, which most people will. I mean, I don't play the Sicilian, so maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like most people won't even look at this as like a line they need to consider while studying and preparing, unless they know their opponent is going to play it. Yeah, of course, we'll just look for a rook trade to get the material off the board and make the conversion easy. We are up a bishop, a knight, and a rook. So this shouldn't be particularly difficult. A bit confused as to why my opponent's playing on, but do whatever he wants, I suppose. Let's nab another pawn and then look for some kind of mating net. And yeah, my opponent eventually resigns. So yeah, very interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed. I also have a full playlist dedicated to games in the Mengarini Sicilian. So you'll be able to find that either down below or on my channel playlist page. Should be quite easy to find it. It's also known as the A3 Sicilian. But anyway, let's jump into the analysis. Okay, so 90.6% accuracy for us, 78.3 for my opponent. Let's jump into it. So we of course start with the A3 Sicilian. My opponent goes knight to C6, which is one of the more common lines, and it's a line we love to see. So we can go for the gambit. If black doesn't accept the gambit, B5 and kick the knight around a bit, which, you know, we can get an interesting sort of position. I think D4 is viable, but Queen B3 is slightly more accurate. Like knight back to C7, knight to F3, and it's an interesting position. It's very strange, very, very strange. Like G5 is the best move, for example, which I wouldn't say is particularly natural. So yeah, my opponent takes, we take, and we go for C3, D4, taking the full center. And D5 is considered a mistake by the engine, although it's the most common move and the most natural looking move. I think calling it a mistake is slightly harsh, but we get a lovely position after this knight to A3 move, and it's really hard for black to hold on here. And A6 is a decent move. And knight b5 I don't think quite works very well anymore, because after queen d8, if we go pawn d5, there is knight to a5. And if bishop f4, then this knight can be taken because the knight on a5 blocks the rook's vision of the other rook. If the knight were to go back to b8, then bishop f4 would be winning, threatening knight c7, and if you take, you lose the rook. But after a6, we can go knight to c4, threatening knight to b6 ideas. And my opponent gives a check on e4, which is a mistake. It looks very natural. The best move is rook b8, and after bishop f4, hitting the rook. If queen here check, I assume just knight e2 defending the bishop. I mean, I don't really know how black survives this. I guess he has to give back a pawn, and if something like take bishop d6, queen f3 is strong, knight f3 is good, and we just have a comfortable position. Material equality is restored, and we have a good center. But queen e4, bishop e2 is the best move, and taking on g2 is not great. The queen g6 is the best response, because if the queen, I mean, there's no other safe square for the queen, so it has to go to g6. And here, that's actually really interesting, because I was trying to decide between knight b6, d5, I think bishop f4, and knight to e2. Those were all my considerations. And I think I chose the worst one with bishop f4, which is still good, as you can see, but it's not the best. Knight e2 is the best. And I was thinking knight f4 is going to be a big threat. And let's say black plays a move like knight to f6. After knight b6, rook b8, bishop f4, pawn e5. The engine wants rook g1. Hey? What's the point? Rook g... Okay. That is not a maneuver I considered at all. Okay, well, I go bishop f4. And I was expecting e5, which is the best move. And if I go bishop e5, knight e5, knight e5, I'm down a pawn, although d5 is better. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Let's say bishop f5, which looks natural. Well, that just gives up b7, so that seems a bit silly. Let's say bishop c5. I was thinking my opponent might go for this sort of thing. Rook a5 is the best move here, which maybe I would find. I guess the point is if b6, we can take and go for this and this. So, yeah, you can't defend the bishop. But queen e6, and I go queen e2. So, that's interesting, because I thought, okay, we have to go for one of these moves, because the knight is hanging. And I thought bishop e2 was too passive. And I'm right, I'm actually losing here after queen e4. I'm just getting run over. But the best move is actually knight e3, which I didn't even consider. I mean, obviously the knight can block, but I thought I should leave it on c4 to threaten knight b6. But apparently this is the best line, and I suppose d5 is a really big threat. So the engine wants black to retreat the knight so that he doesn't get forked. And then queen a4? Queen b4. And if bishop be c6, then we have d5. And if bishop back to c8, then, you know, we're just kind of storming the place. I went queen e2, and we're still better after the exchange. But black again has to play d5, which is what I was calculating. And the best line is knight takes, bishop takes. I was trying to see if knight b6 could work. Of course, if take, then take. But I thought after rook b8 and de5, that black was actually okay after bishop e6, stopping the advancement of the pawn. There's still play here after knight d4, which is the best move and the move I wanted to play. Something like take, and we do have threats, but black is okay here after a check. Let's say king e2, and I don't know, knight e7, just trying to defend the d5 square. But my opponent goes bishop f5, and it's just losing. d5 is apparently inaccurate. Knight b6 immediately is better. And after rook d8, take, and what? Bishop c7. Oh, the rook is just completely trapped by the minor pieces. That's pretty cool. They just defend all the squares. That's quite nice. But I went d5. b5 is a blunder. Knight to a7 has to be played. And after knight b6, rook d8, knight d4, let's say, I don't know, bishop g6, we can apparently just castle, and we're down 2 pawns, but like black can't move. Also, bishop c7 can be played whenever we want to win the rook. But b5, I was going to take here, which is completely winning, but knight b6 is the best move, and we're attacking the rook. The rook has to move. We take the knight, and there is just no stopping the advancement. Queenside castle, and yeah, my opponent plays on a little bit, which is a bit unnecessary, I think, but eventually resigns in this position. But yeah, again, you know, 2200 rated opponent. We're playing a sideline that the engine, you know, it doesn't love. It thinks on move 2, after the move a3, that we've effectively given away our advantage of being the white pieces. But at the end of the day, if it's going to work against a 2200 rated opponent in a relatively long form rapid game, it's probably going to work for 99% of you watching. But yeah, like I said, I've got a full playlist dedicated to the A3 Sicilian, Mengarini Sicilian, whatever you want to call it. And I'll link one of my A3 Sicilian videos up here for you to watch if you want to learn more. And if you want to see the previous episodes of this rapid rating climb, then check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.